Like an intro or like
Do I need like something to get people excited about?
we just need someone.
We need
You need to like a big like explosion or something.
Jackson goes. You should edit it. Yeah, like an intro and an outro. Like, hey guys, it's me.
Okay, so maybe like you guys should do that for me, because I've got too much
do
to
it
make
right
it
now?
fancy now. Okay, so this whole unit is about weathering, erosion, and deposition. So weathering, we said the key word is the breakdown. We're moving on to erosion, because once the pieces are broken down and they're small, well, it's a lot easier to move small pieces of something than it is a big piece, right? So if you have like a boulder, well, it's a lot harder for wind or water to transport and move that boulder, right? If you have a little pebble, that's very easy to move, you know, with a little bit of wind or a little bit of water, that can get moved from one place to another. All right, so we're kind of at that point. It makes sense logically that if you have an item and it gets broken into a smaller piece, which is weathering, then it can start to get transported, which is that key word for erosion. All right, so erosion is what happens because soil and rocks and things do not stay in one place. Okay, they definitely are moving around. And so erosion can be caused when water flows along Earth's surface. This can happen when wind is blowing, and anytime the wind or water is moving, typically it's going to carry things with it. Yeah, I'll hold up on that. And so gravities and glaciers are also part of this, because if you think about like something being on the side of a mountain, well, we know that normal force works perpendicular. And so it's going to be holding the object like this, but so when you're flat, no problem, right? Like it's just going to stay there. But if you start to change the incline, just like you feel if you're on a hill, you're going to feel that downward pull. It's not that gravity has lessened or that normal force has changed. What happens is the effect of what you feel has changed. And so same thing is true for anything that is on the side of a hill or a mountain, right? It's going to get pulled downward. So when we say gravity, we're talking, typically we're talking about something that's on a slope. If it's on flat ground, then gravity's just pulling straight down and it's not really going to move. But if it's on a hill, then it's going to start to roll downward, okay? And then we'll get to glaciers at the end of this. This can be harmful because plants don't grow very well if topsoil is removed. And so if all the soil that's on the top is getting eroded or moved to a new location, you have a problem. So a lot of times, like on the side of mountains, if there's not vegetation with lots of roots to hold that soil in, that's why the side of a lot of mountains are very rocky, because all the soil gets washed down the mountain, and then the valleys at the bottom are very rich and fertile because it has all the soil that used to be on the sides of the hills, now it's down at the bottoms in the valley. And so again, this is common on steep slopes and when you have little vegetation. So grasses, trees with lots of big roots, like all of that helps. Shrubs, any kind of vegetation or plant growth can help keep the soil where you're, you know, like on the side. This is also true if you have ever, like, how many people live in Candlewood? Okay, so if you've ever looked at the side around the lake, there are big chunks where that soil has like clumped off and now it's in the lake, it's at the bottom or like along the sides. If there's no grass or no roots to help anchor that, then it can get soft and then it can just get washed away during a storm. And so that can be a big problem. Okay, often we humans speed this process up, and we're going to look at this a little bit more in depth tomorrow. Yes.
How?
Tomorrow.
Why is it more today?
Well, I'm just going to have to keep you interested. So we say that there are 4 main agents of erosion. When I say agents, it's not like special agent, FBI person. We're saying like the cause. So there are 4 main causes or things that are responsible for erosion, and they are humans, water, wind, gravity, and glaciers. So 2 W's, 2 G's, yeah, sorry, and then the humans, which is the 5th one. So there's 4 natural processes and then us, okay? So wind, water, gravity, glaciers, humans. Okay. All right. So agriculture is farming, right? So this is one of the major ways that we change our surface. Does anybody ever, did anybody ever know or be told like what used to be where our school is? Anybody know what that was? What do you think?
A field.
It was a field, right? And if you didn't know, it's probably a good guess just to say, hey, probably a field. So it was a field. And so obviously we as humans made a big change taking that farming field and turning it into our school, into parking lots, into playgrounds, into the building, into sidewalks. And so we definitely have changed that, right? And so not only do we do construction on different areas, but if we're talking in our area, there's a lot of farming, right? Yes?
Since we changed the environment, doesn't that mean that the school is bad for the environment?
I'm not saying it's bad. Change isn't always bad, but it is a change, right? And in this building, you're learning how to take care of the ground and the earth and the land. So, kind of works and is a
I
positive.
kind of like it better when I was a field.
Me too.
We still had schools, they just weren't nearly this nice. So, you still had to go to school.
I'd rather
Okay,
go.
so think about farming. Farmers in the spring will plow up the field, then they go in and they plant, and then, in the fall, they harvest, they take the combines and they take the beans or the corn or whatever it is off. Like, we've all seen this, we live here, we understand the process. Whether you're a farmer or know a farmer, like, we've seen them out, we see what they do, right? The problem is, if you are loosening the soil, you're opening it up to be affected by a big storm, like if, like how yesterday it was raining so hard. If that soil is loose and that water is rushing through the field, it can take that topsoil and it can deposit it somewhere else. That can be a problem if they don't pay attention to that. That's why a lot of times during the winter, they go in and put tile, they call it field tile, like those big plastic tube looking like things to help things drain and drain where they want them to, so that it's not having standing water in the field, or not having, like, when a storm comes through with a bunch of water, where it doesn't form like these little temporary little rivers where they pull all this topsoil and good nutrient rich soil into the ditches. They're not farming the ditches. They want their good soil to stay in their fields, and having good drainage will help prevent that erosion of that good topsoil. Yes?
People don't really do that up here, I found out. 'Cause there's
Tile?
a lot, there's just a lot of ponds, not ponds, but like standstill water after
Yeah,
rain.
so it's expensive. Like, it is a process. So I know, like, if you go to Marion, I saw not too long ago, they were putting some tile in their fields. They have like these giant, huge rolls of it, and they they have these lines that they start crisscrossing through their fields, and they have a system to it where they lay that tile and then cover it back up, and then it helps with the drainage. But it is expensive. So if you see, and sometimes it's because field tile has gotten broken or plugged off for some reason, and then that's when the drainage messes up, and so you'll see like little ponds, temporary ponds form and stuff. But the problem is, the farmers have to figure out, like, how do I keep my soil where I want it, not like getting washed away. And there's a few things that they can do to keep the soil good and to keep it where they want. One thing is called crop rotation, which is why, I know you're in the fields, like around our house, like usually we have beans for 2 years and then corn, beans for 2 years and then corn, right? You see that rotation. And the beans are actually a legume, which is a nitrogen fixing type of plant, and that they put nitrogen back into the soil, which is a good kind of fertilizer, right? And so that's one thing. So not always using the same crop, which is always taking the same exact minerals and things out of the soil. So by switching it up, it keeps the soil kind of fresher. The other thing is something called no-till farming, and you can see a picture of it right here. And this has gotten really popular as technology has increased and changed. There's a lot of different types of seeds that they are planting now, and that they can, actually do, like, thrive and do really good, where old seeds couldn't. And so something that is called no-till farming means they take these seeds and they don't plow up the field. They just drill them right into the ground, just put them right into the ground. And the seeds have enough, they're altered enough where they're able to actually start to germinate and start to put their roots, and then they're able to form into the beans or the corn or whatever it is. And because of that, they don't have to till up the ground. Yes,
The farm behind our house does that.
the no-till.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Like,
so
they
you
just
can
kinda
see.
just throw the beans on the ground.
Yeah.
I took one and put it in my yard.
Did it grow?
Yes.
Awesome. So you can see here, the year before, they must have planted corn. And you can see some of the stalks, and they look like they've been kind of weathered all winter long. They're kind of smaller. They look like they're kind of soft. So they can either drill the beans in, or like Zach said, like and like I said, there's so much technology that's changing with farming. Those seeds that used to not, like if you would sprinkle the seeds on top before, they wouldn't grow. Now they've altered them enough, and we'll talk about genetically engineered or genetically modified materials later on this year. But they're able to plant them in a different way where they don't have to till up. And that saves a lot of diesel fuel, that saves a lot of wear and tear on their equipment, because they don't have to go, if you say you have a 500, hey, boys, say you have a 500 acre field, you don't have to run the disc through that whole 500 acres and then run the planter. Like, you only have to make one trip through that field, right? Instead of having to plow it up and then go back and plant. So it saves a lot of time, a lot of wear and tear on the equipment, a lot of diesel fuel, which is stupid expensive, and a lot of time for the farmers themselves, right? You only have a small window to get things done where the ground's dry before rain comes in. Like, they have to be strategic about it. So this no-till farming has kind of revolutionized farming for sure. Forest harvesting. This is tropical regions are at risk. There are some trees that only grow in certain places, and of course those are the popular trees that people want for flooring and furniture and things like that. So, you know, a lot of times if you go in and you whack down a bunch of trees, well, the natural cover and things that used to be there to protect that land is now gone. And that can be obviously fairly devastating. And the topsoil in those areas, if they're clearing it, like when I was in Ecuador, this was a huge problem. They were going in and they were clearing out all these forests, and they wanted to farm that land. So they had cleared the forest, and then when they go to clear it and they start to farm it, the soil isn't the greatest because remember how we talked about leaching, like that coffee filter idea? The nutrients get leached through the layers of soil down deep where the roots for those big trees were. Well, you're not planting down deep, you're planting at the surface. And so the topsoil itself isn't super rich and nutrient rich, I guess. And so they go to farm it, and the soil's only good for a couple years, and then their crops don't do very well, and they just abandon the land. So they took out this whole woods or forest for no reason, because it doesn't give them good, sustainable farmland. So that was a huge issue, you know, and we've gotten better and smarter about realizing, hey, this isn't the best plan. Like, we need to be smarter about this. But in a lot of third world countries where people are trying to have plots of land to help grow the food that they need to eat, they're just like, who cares? Chop the trees down, sell them, and then we'll farm the land that's cleared, right? And so if that good minerals and topsoil, those minerals have leached down, because that's what happens in a forest or woods. That's why those trees are there, because their roots are so deep and they're able to get those deep nutrients. It kind of leaves the topsoil not great, and it doesn't last and gets used up. Overgrazing by animals. You'll see this quite a bit. I know, so we have like 4 or 5 4-acre pastures, and putting 2 horses on it, they can keep it 8 down, but they don't like overgraze it. If you put 3, it totally changes it. Like they, like just, it seems like that one extra horse on that 4 acres, just, they mow it down. And like you get down where, and if you let them keep doing that, they'll get down to the very roots of the pasture, and then they start pulling them up, and then you don't have anything to regrow, like if you rotate. So we like to kind of keep 2 in a pasture and be able to rotate them around so that there's always a pasture that's open, and then that way it can get grown up. When one gets down a little bit, then we can put the horses back on the one that we had let grow up. So like we try to be strategic about it, because it's really expensive to fertilize the fields and it's really expensive to reseed them. So we definitely don't want to just throw money away and like waste our pastures. But again, this can be a huge issue. And then construction, and I kind of mentioned that a little bit about like what used to be here on our ground, that where our school is now, right? So if anybody has been around a construction site, obviously they remove all the soil, the topsoil, and then there's just that dirt. And so a lot of times like they try to put matting down, they put mulch down, they put different things to try to keep that soil in place as much as possible so things don't get washed out. And so we'll look at that a little bit more tomorrow. Let's keep, hey, we have like 3 or 4 minutes. Let's finish this one. So thinking about our agents, we have wind, water, glaciers, gravity, and humans. All right, so we're gonna start with a little bit of water today. Runoff is water that is coming down so fast that it has no time to soak into the ground, or maybe the ground is already full of water and saturated. And so runoff is when the water has nowhere to go and it just flows downhill or to the lowest point, right? And we see this a lot. Look, this is a pretty common thing. You have a field, it looks like little temporary rivers form. So things that can affect runoff are how much rain did we get? How much time did that rain fall in? Like, was it like a downpour super quick? How steep the land is. The steeper it is, the less time it has to soak into the ground. And if it's been raining for a while, the ground's already saturated, so it has nowhere to soak into anyway, so it has to run off somewhere. And so also, is there vegetation? Is there vegetation there that will help soak up the water? Is there vegetation there that will slow down the flow of water? And that kind of thing. And so we'll take a look at this tomorrow, but again, this is super common. Like, has everybody seen something kind of that looks like that? Like, we're really lucky where we live. We get mad at Ohio because our weather is so crazy. But we do get to actually experience a lot of things, and being in the country, we get to see a lot more than what you would if we lived like in a city somewhere. So a lot of these things you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I recognize this, or this seems familiar. All right, so we will stop there.